Hello, and welcome to the Hibernation podcast. My name is Dahyo, and I'm inviting you to join me for a weekly conversation with some of the amazing artists who've decided to stream with us over the course of the festival. Before we start the show today, we'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the custodians of the land upon which we stand. Wherever we are in this country, Indigenous sovereignty has never been ceded, and we must be mindful that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. As we share and explore music throughout the festival, we are also on a site that carries the reverberations of many centuries of music and cultural making. Joining us this week is Cheng. Sam is an emerging Asian-Australian composer, sound designer, instrumentalist, and current student at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. She's a flautist and saxophonist and writes for theatre, film, podcasts, concert, and more, working with both acoustic instruments and electronic sound design in all genres. She's been involved in theatre productions for the Sydney University Dramatic Society, Slanted Theatre, and Eye Contact Theatre, as well as independent short films for arts cooperatives such as Shopfront. Sam has also released music under the independent music label Fourth Strike as part of the Sig Figs collective. How are you today, Sam?
I'm good. How are you, Dahyo?
Not bad. Thank you for coming on.
No problem. This is exciting.
Is it? Okay, I'm glad. So I first met you at the con, big surprise. You were in my class doing composition, but I understand that you had some experience with music beforehand. I guess my first question is, what made you choose composition as some sort of study path?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I knew that I kind of wanted to continue music in uni. But I honestly don't think I'm good enough at performance to sort of make it into the performance thing. But I knew that I always really loved music, and I always wanted to study it in some form in the future. And I was choosing between doing a double degree and doing just music. But then I applied for the con, I got in, and I was like, oh, might as well, and if I hate it I will change. But I'm still here, so it can't be that bad.
So it can't be that bad. Yeah, you're in fourth year now, correct? You're almost finished.
Yeah, this is my last semester, and then I'll be out of here next year.
You're sad to go, aren't
Insane to
you?
think about.
Oh.
So sad. No, but it's been good.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, I think I've always known you as having sort of quite quirky, musically active compositions, and yeah. I've seen your work outside of obviously class performances and stuff. The most that I have engaged with your music has been at theatre gigs. So how did you sort of go down that road of getting interested in writing for live theatre and all of this?
Yeah, so it is kind of like a long story, but basically I was asked to play in a band for a theatre show at SUDS, or at Sydney Uni, the Drama Society there, and I was playing sax in there, just in the big band for a play. And then after that I was like, hey, despite I wasn't as super involved in the process, but I would it was the kind of thing where I was like, whoa, I would actually love to do that and get involved in writing something for theatre, because it was just sort of a way to get practical experience for composing, right? Actually putting on a show rather than just writing for college assignments.
It really makes a difference in terms of the stress and motivation. I think, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So theatre ended up being I actually ended up really liking it. And I think for me, it was the collaborative process of I really enjoy working on music or working on a project with a lot of people, and organizing that kind of thing. And I think because I did go into uni to do composition, arts, classical art music, contemporary classical kind of thing. But then I ended up completely changing, because I think I just ended up really liking more of I'm making music towards in service of a story, and I'm doing it in a group with other people to create a work of art as a whole, rather than just writing a music for a string ensemble kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's something about just writing for ensembles, I'm going to write a string quartet, that it doesn't feel as satisfying to do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just my weird aversion to sort of traditional ensembles or whatever, but I do think it's interesting, this idea of you you writing for a story, and working with other people. Do you enjoy that sort of aspect of collaborating with people in different disciplines?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's so interesting, like, you know, hearing other people's thoughts and like what music they would like, or what kind of vision they had for the piece. And I think like, I think just for me, writing music for the sake of music is kind of like, it's not really what I'm here for. Like, I always enjoy, like, when I always start a piece, I'm always like, what am I trying to tell? Like, what am I trying to evoke here? What story am I like helping in service of? So in that way, like, I super got attached to like writing for theatre, or like the idea of doing it for a film and stuff like that. And like, using like technical knowledge of music to make the narrative feel better almost.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you find it difficult working with directors?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I'm so sorry if any of my directors are listening to this. This is not about like individual people being
It's not
annoying.
about you, it's about the other ones.
Yeah, it's not about you in particular. But it's more like, it's less about like, because I have worked with like really great directors, as in like they have a really great vision and I really like what they're going for. But it's also that whole idea where it's like they have a very specific vision of what they want the music to be, and they also don't really study music, so it's sometimes hard to like communicate across the thing. But usually people, when they say they don't like working with directors, it's sometimes like a very, I think, I just want to be able to do what I want. But mine is like, I'm happy to cater to what they want, especially like if I do really enjoy their vision. But it's just more like getting through the little miscommunications of what exactly they want.
The translation, I mean, I guess directors probably feel the same way about composers, but I think for us, in the way that we think, do you think it's something to do with the translation between sort of musical, like if I were talking to you about some musical idea, it would be a lot easier than if I were talking to someone who hadn't studied music and doesn't have that sort of necessarily that experience, and then it's hard to communicate the same ideas as succinctly.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's sort of like, I guess it's like just technical language of like, like trying to get across like, I would say like triplets here, or like I would say like, this very specific, like would be in the Dorian mode, but like I can't because that person would not understand. So it's that kind of idea of like, of having to get that across. And also like temp music is like the bane of my existence.
What music, sorry?
Temp music. So it's the kind of like music directors use to like, this is the very specific vibe they want. But,
right. Sort of like a reference track sort of thing.
Yeah. And a lot of the time it is really good. But sometimes they do have a very specific vision, and and like it's really hard to like shift into writing a new piece that doesn't sound exactly like that piece, but also that piece is exactly what that person wants.
Yes. The very few times I've worked with directors, I think I've had that experience. So you have written for short films,
yes.
But I feel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you have written much more for theatre than for film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any reason why that is?
I think I find theatre, it's more fun to be experimental with theatre. Theatre, like I've noticed that theatre directors just tend to let you do what you want, literally. Like,
right.
They're
so
just like, they have they have a very specific vibe for like how they want the play as a whole to feel, but they're way more willing to just be like, the sound designers know what they're doing, they'll do what they want. And also there's like, they're more focused on like the directing and like the actual the on stage kind of thing, and so like a lot of the design elements, like we do get a little bit more free rein with that, which is really it's a way to be more experimental, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Have you got any examples of when you've been able to experiment, push the envelope?
So I was working on a play called Breathing Corpses, and that was one of my first like big moments of like composing for like a bigger play, because a lot of the stuff I've been doing for like uni societies and independent director sort of thing has been a lot smaller, but it unfortunately got postponed because of COVID.
Oh, is this the one with eye contact?
Yeah.
I was going to
Contact
bloody
Theatre.
go to that. I was sad when that got cancelled.
I got friends to come and everything, and then it got cancelled, which is tragic. But yeah, like that one I had a lot of fun with because it was like working with soundscapes at like a very eerie and sort of like a little bit of a surreal level. Because the play is it's a really lovely play, and it's quite dark, and it's a little bit like creepy and surreal, but also like a little bit optimistic. So there's this kind of, it was a very fun vibe to play with, and also like I could do it knowing that like whatever wacky stuff that I kind of did, it would kind of like, the play almost called for it in that way.
Right.
Yeah. So that was very fun, and it's something that, I don't necessarily think a film director would.
You feel like they sort of micromanage a little bit more.
Yeah, but I guess that makes sense because like,
but
I guess it does make sense because film is more of like a strict medium, like it has to be perfect. It's just one time.
Yeah.
And theater, it's like, well, it's live, so the play is naturally gonna change every time you perform it.
Which is kind of nice though.
Yeah, it's very fun.
I think also the sort of culture of working in theatre can be quite fun. I mean, I've had sort of, personally, I've had mixed experiences. I've had very good ones and sort of not so great ones. But what about you? How's your sort of experience with the theatre community been?
I really like them. Like, like it's been pretty great. I think the theatre community is really, I don't know, in a way it's like, it was quite accepting to like newcomers, or at least Suds was, in that like, they really were, they were doing a lot of events and things to like bring in new people. So I've like found the community to be really supportive. I think like in some ways I was sort of thrown into the deep end once I started doing like gigs, like proper gigs, like paid gigs rather than just for uni things, but in a way where it's like, like I am like, really grateful to all the people who gave me that chance of like, as a uni student, to be able to write music for this stuff.
Absolutely. And I think getting thrown into the deep end can be good sometimes. Because otherwise
you need it.
Because otherwise, we're just not going to fucking do anything. It's like, that if you have to do stuff, I think it forces you to. And that can be good for you, right?
Yeah. No, it's great.
So, Orlando was the first, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
The first
play that you wrote for. I remember going to that. How was your experience with that?
It was really lovely. I loved it. It was like, I'm always going to remember it. One, because like, literally my first play. But two, it was also like, it was a queer play. It was like, it was purposely like sort of written, like both it's by like Virginia Woolf, but also like the community around it. Like it was directed by a trans woman and a gay man. So it was very much, they put this play on to be...
Wait, you mean the original one or the Suds performance?
Oh, the Suds performance.
Right.
It was put on to be like a sort of queer community play thing, and it was so good. It was truly one of the best experiences.
Well, it's a good sort of story for a queer play, isn't it? It's and do you think that maybe why they chose it, because of the story and because of sort of Virginia Woolf as a woman and as a writer?
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess, do you find that working on a project that is a like a queer project, like outwardly a queer project, did you find that was a different experience for you than, for example, working with some different ensemble or some different group that is not like, they might be accepting or open, but that it's not like the goal,
No, definitely, for sure. I think it's like, I mean, one, it was just kind of like, one, like we were showing during Mardi Gras, and so like on the actual night of like the parade, we changed the date so that's like, actually everyone in our cast is going to want to be at Mardi Gras, so let's actually change this to like a postpone it to another night. So stuff like that, but also stuff like, exactly, it was making that effort to be accepting, and also like we knew we were going into the play reading it as gay kind of thing, right? Like we did take like a very specific, like we were looking through it like with a queer lens of like what if like Orlando was a non-binary person, even though like even though not necessarily they were in the text. But
I'd
we were allowed to.
I mean, I've never actually read the text, but maybe it was just the direction from the play that I watched. But Orlando's gender did seem to change over time. That's what happens?
Yeah, it was
in
like
the play, right?
Yeah, but I think it was more of like, I don't know, it was definitely like an old, I think, old interpretation of gender and that kind of thing, where it was very much like of its time, like not necessarily bad, but like it was a different idea, I think, of gender than we have today.
Yes.
So ours was kind of very much a modern interpretation of like how this text was written at the time. But I'm not an Orlando expert, just by looking the play, so I have no idea. But that's, yeah, of the reading of the script, that's sort of the idea that I got.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was done really well as well. It was, I mean,
Yeah.
I liked it. So
I'm glad. It
I
was very
don't
much
think
like
it's, sometimes I find
production,
that when people take things and make it sort of to be like relevant politically in a modern way, sometimes I find that it's not done very well. It's sort of done in order to seem relevant, but it's not done necessarily very skillfully. For example, I'm not going to name any names or sort of say anything, but there's been a couple of things I've seen that have felt a bit like that. But this wasn't the case, I felt, with the Orlando performance that I watched. That was really good. So well done there.
Thank you.
And then I guess the other production I wanted to talk to you about, which unfortunately I didn't get to see, I think I missed out on tickets, was
It sold out pretty fast.
yeah, it was Chinchon Chinaman, which was by Slanted Theatre. So first off, do you want to talk about the name?
Yeah. So one, I give you the pass to say it. You're Asian.
Well, we've got 1.5 Asian people in the podcast at the moment, so
Yeah, so we can give this podcast an Asian card, and we can say the name. So Chinchon Chinaman was a play, obviously like exploring the Asian experience. It was very specifically the Asian American experience, and it was directed by Tiffany Wong, who runs sort of Slanted Theatre, which is a theatre for like to spotlight Asian Australian artists.
right.
So so that was a really fun experience, because I've never worked on a crew before where everyone was Asian, where everyone was of color, and that was genuinely like, I think even more so than the queer community thing. That felt really, really nice. Just like working on a play with no white people was great.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
How
it was
did
like,
you
we were
how
already
did you sort
on
of
this
get
level.
involved with them?
So Tiffany actually came to see Orlando and asked me after Orlando if I wanted to be involved in it, which is very fun.
If I'd known that would have been like such a good fucking segue.
Yeah. But yeah, because like I composed, but it was like very different music, because I composed for Orlando. I did a string quartet, like a live string quartet.
Right.
But then like Chingchong Chinaman was a comedy. It's sort of like a very satirical parody of like Asian American plays. And so I had to like learn, I guess, like on like hard mode, learn how to write comedic music and get this across. But it was also like a really, really lovely experience. Yeah.
So how did that happen? Sort of learning to write comedic music.
It was a lot of like, because like it was a lot of incidental music where I was sort of like, that was sort of my step into more Foley kind of sound design. While Orlando was like, I was very much just writing music. So it was just, like watching comedies and stuff, and then like trying to get the idea of like how they did Foley, and for like the music, what kind of like things that I could bring back, or like effects I could use to make things sound like a little goofier and a little bit less serious.
Yeah, that's interesting. Funnily enough, I haven't really thought about comedic music very much.
Yeah,
it seems like it would be a really difficult thing to do, like, and not be cringe.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's just like, honestly, half it is leaning into the cringe though, because I feel like cringe
true.
things are still funny.
Yeah, I think if you know that it's cringe, then it's fine. You know,
The self-awareness, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think that if you hadn't been writing for theatre and for plays, and doing this sort of stuff, if you were just writing sort of like contemporary classical music for ensembles and this sort of stuff, and things that didn't necessarily tell a story, do you think that your music would sort of somewhat reflect some idea of the queer experience or the Asian Australian experience?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think it's like, yeah, because you can't exactly, like, it would definitely be true for, like, if I was writing, like, a story. But if it's just music, I don't know how, I guess, like, definitely in a way, I would probably want to explore, like, you know, I'm always interested in, like, different instrumentation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, like, exploring non-Western tonalities, and that kind of thing. Yeah, but that's a hard one. I think, yeah, in ways that are probably a lot more subtle. Like,
Yeah.
I would be drawn to, like, you know, non-Western harmonies and traditional music, and also, like, yeah, and I guess non-typical instrumentation.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that, I mean, I'm half Chinese, and I think that at the con, having access to people who play Chinese instruments has been interesting for me.
Yeah,
for
sure.
I was sort of exploring that a little bit last year, I remember. But I think that you're right that it's a lot. It fits a lot better to be writing music for a play that tells a story that's about the experience, rather than taking that sort of story link out of it and just writing the music and keeping it. I can't speak today.
No,
I'm recording a podcast. Yeah, just writing the music and still keeping that meaning. That seems to be sort of a challenge to me.
Yeah. I think it would definitely be like, it'd be a lot subtle, and I probably wouldn't be thinking about it as much.
It would just sort of
while
come from
writing
your
music.
experiences and stuff.
Yeah, and even then, but it's like also like, but who isn't trying to like break out of like Western harmony when it comes to writing music,
Well,
right?
some people aren't trying to break out of Western harmony. That's the problem, right? Or sort of more so the Western harmony, just sort of Western ideas and this sort of stuff. But I guess composers of color, a lot of us are, to some extent or another, exploring that.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I mean, that's partly just the sort of, I guess, also when you grow up in Australia, you don't necessarily get exposed to as much traditional music from where you come from, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I think that's an interesting observation that I think increasingly, I guess, we are trying to explore this stuff. Yeah, I just didn't really know where to go from there. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's just like a lot of, like in a way working on like projects where it was like just people of color involved or like just queer people involved is like, it's always really nice because it's like, okay, we're already at this fundamental base level. Like, I don't have to explain to you why racism is bad. Like, we all sort of like already knew this, and we were already like in a way of like, we were going to interpret the art and the works that we were doing in this lens already. Like in a queer lens or in a Asian lens kind of thing. There's already like sort of like a fundamental like understanding there for all of us, that just sort of made things like, it just feels better in a way of like working in this space.
Absolutely. I think also, you know, you sort of talk about like racism being bad, for example, or sort of homophobia or any form of, I guess, queerphobia being bad. And yes, like I understand like this stuff is important to talk about, but it is also nice, I think, for me and my experiences with experimenting with using Chinese instruments, for example, is none of those pieces, at least expressly, have been about how racism is bad or racism being a bad thing. I think for me, they've just been more of me exploring some Chinese culture, and I think it's nice to have, probably for queer stuff as well, just exploring and celebrating aspects of queer culture that don't necessarily revolve around oppression. Not that stuff's not important to talk about, but sometimes it's nice to have a bit more happy stuff as well.
No, I could go on about that for ages, because I think like what's so like it tends to like white people making like movies about or like making art about our culture tends to always be really voyeuristic of like, look at how bad oppression is, like look at how hard these guys have it. And it's like, yeah, it's just like, it's so much more refreshing to be in a space where it's like more of a celebration and more of an exploration of like culture and this, rather than like look at how hard we have it under like white people. Like it's
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 that
a very
just sort of,
shallow
well, it just
concept of us.
comes back to white people, I guess. When you do that, it's like, well, it's important, but do you really need to keep bringing them up? Like, can't we just enjoy our own stuff?
Yeah, it's very much like, and I do like super love art where like, it's people, marginalized people like talking about their own experiences with oppression and like their own hardships, but it cannot like, but I don't know, to me you can always tell when it's being written in like a voyeuristic way by white people.
Yeah, true.
And like, oh no, this is a real authentic experience of someone exploring this. But yeah, like my favorite sort of like stories in that will always be ones that just sort of like it's both criticism of like, we live in a horrible society, and also like, but a celebration of like getting through that, and
true, and celebrating the positive aspects of, well, in our case at least, being Asian Australian, right? Like because there are some good things about it. It's not all depressing and crap.
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like people write about it being depressing a lot, and understandably, but sometimes it's nice to have a bit of a change.
Of course.
So in terms of your other non theatre stuff, I remember you a couple of years ago, you were talking about how you didn't want to do electroacoustic music, you just wanted to do instrumental music and stuff, but that seems to have changed recently, correct?
Yeah, what
do you think sparked that?
I think like one, it was like me going into theatre, because theatre called for more like electronic soundscaping music, and also because I wrote like a string quartet for my first play. I was like, oh my god, I don't want to do that again, like not in a bad way, but more like it was such a like, I wrote and did so much that it's like, okay, I'm gonna pull back, and for this next play I'm gonna try doing like just an electronic score, less rehearsal time, that kind of thing. And that was like really, it was really nice, and like actually very fun. I went to the con to like, because I really like, typical film music soundtracks, like, John Powell, John Williams, that kind of thing.
I've interviewed like 3 different composers in this podcast, and everyone's like, I went to the con wanting to do film music and be the next Hans Zimmer.
Right, it's such a cliche, but truly I went because like I love orchestral music, and I do still write like a lot of acoustic music, but I actually I sort of like ended up really enjoying the sort of like how electronic music was less structured. Like it was more about the noise of it and more about the sound and the emotions that evoked.
You specifically asked for Alexis, who's an electroacoustic specialist, as your private teacher. So obviously there is some interest there. So have you been has that sort of led you to experimenting with more stuff?
For sure. Like I had her once before this year. I think it was in second year, where like she sort of was the first person who sort of introduced me to electroacoustic music, and that was really fun. And so it was that idea. It was like, oh, okay, like I can have her as a teacher again, and we could like really go into this, especially now that I'm doing film. And I think like her teaching me the fundamentals and the basics was very much a reason why I could do film, like film and theatre sound design. After that, super grateful for that, and she is a great teacher, and
she is
very much.
I mean, she's who got me
it's
into
really fun.
Electroacoustic music as well. So I guess we both have that we both owe her that one. Do you write when you're using electronics? Do you use them often with acoustic instruments, or is it more of a separate? Like I write acoustic tracks and I write like electronic tracks.
It's usually like with each other, because I do really like, recording acoustic instruments like as samples and then manipulating those to sound like wacky and strange. That's always really fun. I think it's always a little bit of the merge of like the familiar and like the conventional sort of instrumentation, but then also just making it sound strange and different. And I think that really helps with like getting across like emotion and like feeling and atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, it sort of gives it some sort of sense of interactivity, I guess, if you're doing it live with the musician playing, and it
for sure
does certain things. I mean, that's always interesting, I guess. But yeah, I mean, like, you're having a piece in our sound server Minecraft project.
Yeah.
That's an electroacoustic piece, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so do you want to talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so I don't know how much I can spoil in this one, but I'm super excited for. I think it's such a cool idea. I love the idea of like a Minecraft world that you can like walk in and listen to other people's music, and I think it's like it's sort of worth it, like especially in lockdown, to be able to like be in a virtual space together, if not in a real concert hall.
Yeah, somewhat interact with other people, I guess.
Yeah, right. And sort of see what other people have been working on. But yeah, so my piece was very much an exploration of sound, and you'll see exploration of sound like underwater and in different elements. And yeah, so subaqueous is like, it was very much like about like exploring panning and stereo and space and like sort of unusual combinations of like it's very much focused on like low frequencies and like the bassy sort of feel because it's like underwater. So yeah, it was a very fun piece, and like yeah, I really had a lot of fun like pushing the boundaries of like design of like sound design and and space like that.
Yeah, so spatialization techniques were an important part of your sort of creative process with that piece.
Yeah, pretty much.
Why were you interested in space as a concept?
I think like definitely because of my theater thing of like, oh, I want to get better at like sort of evoking space and specific like scenarios and worlds through like sound. So initially it was just like, oh, I want to get better at like theater stuff. And then it became like this like, 3-part album where it's like exploring a different space, but like also in completely different styles and completely new for me at least, to write, and that was very fun. And it was just I am proud of what I managed to do for that piece.
That's good. It's always nice to hear someone say they're proud of what they've written rather than most of us just go, I hate it. But yeah, so you have a stereo like headphone mix, but you also have a binaural mix. What is binaural stuff?
Honestly, I'm very new at it as well. Like that piece was the first time I just sort of used binaural mixing, but it's very much like the way, like it's a kind of way to listen to things like on the headphones, where you can really feel it all around you and not just from the left and the right, but in all directions and also like up and down. So it's sort of like a fully 3D space. And I think, it's the kind of thing where it could work like either with headphones or like with multiple speakers in a room.
Right.
And that was like quite fun. It was actually like a lot easier than I was expecting it to be, because binaural mixing sounds like such a technical term, but it was like I just got a few good plugins and we were like, and then we messed around with like turning the knobs and stuff until we got like a good sense, and that was quite fun. I always love panning, and like I probably overuse it in some mixes, but like like hearing things and like just from one side, like the idea of space. So that was very fun to have like a whole bunch of like sound elements coming at you from all sides.
I'm assuming it was quite a technical process, like intricate in terms of your automation and drawing those automation curves and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so it was a lot of like tiny sound elements that I ended up like panning to different sides, or like doing auto panning where it was sort of like randomized all over the place.
Right, so I imagine that'd be quite fiddly.
Yeah, but also like sometimes like I was lucky to work with like a good synth that like let me sort of just like randomly like auto pan and do granular stuff with it.
Right.
That sort of did some of that for me, which was really good.
Yeah, it's always good when you can sort of palm off the work to a computer to some extent,
Yeah.
That's interesting though. I mean, I will be interested to see how that works out with the sound server stuff, because the way that Minecraft is going to work is we're only going to be able to play mono files. So there'll be mono files that come from a certain point in space, which like, it's a mixed blessing, right? Because the good thing is you can actually put things in a room to come from that spot.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. And then you can walk around and the mix sort of changes. The thing that I think to be aware of is that in that case, like, also people will be moving around, so things will change.
Yeah, so things will change.
So
I'm kind of curious how that would sound though.
yeah,
because,
same.
like,
I think that'll be interesting.
I think it would be very fun. Like, if anything, it might just enhance it because it's like, yeah, because you like, especially because it's like about being literally in an underwater space, that it sort of like evolves as you move. I think that's very fun.
No, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So, hopefully we'll stop building your rooms soon. We've got
Yeah.
a lot of rooms that are getting built, but
Oh,
I
I'm
am really
excited.
looking forward to this one, especially because it's going to be underwater, which is sick.
Yeah, I think that's so
I really
fun.
like the idea of having an underwater space.
And also,
Yeah.
like, I think Minecraft that had like the new Coral Reef update. I remember when that came out, I had not played Minecraft in like years, and then I was like, "There's a Coral Reef update," and I updated my Minecraft just to explore, and like booted up a new world just to explore the new Coral Reef update. So I was like, I'm very excited.
Yeah, I think the sort of sandbox exploration-y nature of the game really works with this idea of sort of curating a festival in comments in
Yeah.
what are they called, quotation marks, a festival, because it's sandbox and because you can hack it and play your own music and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for submitting something for that.
No problem.
I
It's
know
a
you've been
pleasure.
really busy lately, so it was nice to find something that we could fit you in with.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. So this has been the Hibernation podcast. Unfortunately, we are running out of time.
No problem.
But thank you very much, Sam, for coming on this week, the podcast. And all you lovely listeners at home, thank you for tuning in once again. We couldn't do this without your support. Try to get a vaccine if possible. I know it's not
Please
easy.
do. Us musicians are dying.
Yeah, we are.
We want to get out of here.
We want to play some like real life gigs.
Yeah. My
But
God.
yes, thank you for tuning in. It really means a lot having you guys support live music. And yeah, thanks again, Sam, for coming on. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries. Bye bye.